Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, the Department of Budget and Management is due to submit today the 2026 National Expenditure Program to Congress as widespread allegations of mangling continue to hound this year's budget. Where to next on budget transparency and public governance as the President launches the Sumbong sa Pangulo platform at flood control projects. Sheno Magdo of the UP School of Economics and co-chair of the Global Steering Committee of the Open Government Partnership joins us live. And prospects of rate cuts by the Fed and the Bangko Sentral keep risk appetites aloft in the local stock market. But for how much longer? We get insights from Jasper Onda, equity analyst at Regina Capital Development Corporation. Deliberations over the proposed 6.793 trillion peso budget for 2026 are set to begin as the House is set to receive the National Expenditure Program at the top of the hour. The Budget Department handed the 2026 NEP to President Marcos yesterday, Tuesday, during a ceremony in Malacanang. Marcos approved the spending program last month, which is 7.4% higher from this year's 6.326 trillion pesos. The Presidential Communications Office said the budget focuses on upholding fundamental rights, including education, health, and food security. Based on a copy of the NEP seen by the Philippine Star, the Transportation Department gets the biggest hike in the proposed budget, up by 125% due to additional funding for DOTR's foreign assisted projects. The Education Department is poised to receive an additional 26% in funding from this year's GAA, and this is on top of the budget for other educational institutions. While allocation for the Agriculture Department is about 24% higher from the current appropriation. The Departments of National Defense, Health and Social Welfare and Development, and the Interior and Local Government face a single-digit budget hike. Meanwhile, funds for the Department of Public Works and Highways are poised to decline by 23% due to the reduced provision for the sustainable infrastructure projects, alleviating gaps in the basic infrastructure program. The House will look first into the alleged irregularities in the 2025 budget process to avoid such controversy when the 2026 budget season kicks off, according to a deputy speaker.
And, many of us have already agreed that before we go into deliberations on the 2026 budget, we are first going to go back to the 2025 budget and see, what went wrong here. We're going to review all the information that the President has put out in public. And we want to see who is responsible here.
Meanwhile, a DBM official warned that a reenacted budget could slow the country's growth momentum. The official, who requested anonymity, told the Philippine Star that a reenactment would prevent the government from working on new projects. It would also lead to outdated spending allocations. Malacanang says President Bongbong Marcos wants his legacy to center on anti-corruption. This following the launch of the Sumbong sa Pangulo website for citizens to report alleged irregularities in flood control projects. In an interview in Storycon, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the president is working to prove himself different from his parents, focusing on fighting corruption. Castro said the president should be given the chance to deliver results despite criticisms about his family's history and his mother's graft conviction. Castro said the initial list of contractors allegedly involved in anomalous flood control projects is only the beginning, with more names likely to be released once inspections and reviews are complete. She also said that while the focus is on flood control projects, investigations could eventually extend to other infrastructure such as roads and bridges.
Yung pong RPMC natin, yung tinatawag nating Regional Project Monitoring Committees, yan na po ay mayroon ng mga, nag-draft na sila ng mga review, kung paano reviewin. At mag-start sila ng site inspection. Hindi na basta ito nagagawa overnight. Meron silang gagawing pag-record and reporting at i-consolidate po lahat ito. At pag na-consolidate po ito yung ibibigay sa Pangulo.
So, posibleng may madadagdag pang mga kumpanya. That's not yet the complete list.
Oo, hindi pa po. Initial pa lang po ito, ma'am. As of now, we are concentrating on the flood control projects. But I think, susunod pa rin yung iba. Especially yung mga roads, mga bridges, lahat po yan.
Meanwhile, House Deputy Speaker Ronaldo Puno told the big story. Lawmakers would identify those responsible for anomalies and give them the opportunity to respond to the allegations.
Be sure that we're going to look for the people that are also responsible here.
So you will name names and give them an opportunity to explain themselves.
Well, yes, if the names come out, obviously we're going to ask them to explain themselves. We're going to give everybody a chance to explain whatever allegations are made against anyone.
Sumbong sa Pangulo is specifically designed for public participation, where citizens can look up all flood control projects in their barangay, check their statuses, and report anomalies or suspected corruption directly online. Reports go straight to Malacanang, with the President himself pledging to read each submission, making the feedback loop both direct and highly visible. So what do the netizens feel about the platform? We collated a couple of them, and the reactions are mixed. Some welcome this development, commending the direct channel to the President, while others are not satisfied just yet, saying there should be a follow-through. There are also those who called for immediate response to complaints. With us now for more is Assistant Professor at the School of Economics at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Shelo Magno. She is also co-chair of the Global Steering Committee of the Open Government Partnership. Good to see you, Shelo. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Cathy. Good morning, and good morning to all your listeners.
All right, so what do you make of the Sumbong sa Pangulo platform coming 2 weeks after the President's State of the Nation address?
Well, it's good to have a platform with direct contact to the President, as one of the netizens said. But I think if the President is really serious in addressing these problems with respect to infrastructure, he has to look at the complete value chain. Number one, he has to look at whether these infrastructure projects that are being funded by our budget are consistent with our economic development plan and the disaster resilience program of the country. The thing is, a few weeks ago, the Department of Budget and Management responded to this issue of pork barrel by saying that we can limit the suggestions of congressmen by a menu. And it doesn't really address the problem, right? Because the point is, we have to make sure that these infra projects contribute to our development and disaster resilience, prevention, etc. That's the first stage. The second stage is that I think the President has to be more transparent and has to establish a mechanism for accountability. The reality is that these corruption incidences happen because of a collusion of government and the private sector, the contractors, right? So there has to be a space for third-party independent groups to be part of the conversation and really conduct independent audit with respect to the quality of these infrastructure projects. Right now, what we have is just a platform where people can complain. It doesn't really address the root problem, the root causes of the situation. And I think it's a good start. It creates controversies, it calls attentions, but I think it really requires a follow-through with respect to policy approach from the President. And one of my suggestions is actually to create a multi-stakeholder oversight. The President mentioned it. He's going to create a team to look into this, but I think it is better if this team is institutionalized and it is composed of multi-stakeholders, meaning various representatives from different agencies, representatives from the private sector, and representatives from the civil society to serve as oversight in monitoring not just the construction of this infrastructure project, but the compliance and consistency of these projects to the development plan of the country.
Let me pick up on multi-stakeholder partnership in the way of participatory governance. Have you given it a go, tried searching up some of the projects in your area? And can this platform truly enable and encourage crowdsourced auditing that leads to participatory governance?
Yeah, actually, multi-stakeholder approach is already embedded in our law. It is encouraged, especially at the local government level. It's in the local government code. But the problem is, or the question is whether they're systematically implemented and whether there's genuine representation in those multi-stakeholder board. So the thing is, if the government or the president will create this oversight body, part of the function of the oversight body is to make sure that this different bodies at the local regional level are functioning, doing their monitoring work, doing their oversight, and disclosing information that the public should know. So these are things that have to be institutionalized and has to be done systematically. It's very difficult if you're just going to open a portal. Definitely you will receive various complaints. But the question is, so what do you do with these complaints? You still need to gather information. You still need to investigate. And there's a more systematic way of doing it by creating an organizational structure that will serve as an oversight.
Yeah, it's not the first time that a portal's been open. If we take a look back at the previous ones, let's pull up a chart here. We've collated a couple of them and really show how this platform compares with those that have come up in previous years. Let's take a look at DIME, Project DIME for the Budget Department. Maybe a lot don't even know that it actually existed. It piloted citizen feedback for big infrastructure projects, but it faced limited scope and with feedback often filtered through bureaucracy. So the portal went offline in 2021 because of those implementation challenges you were talking about and the lack of sustained third-party monitoring. Let me give you another here. It's RPMES. It's the regional government, a broader set of infrastructure projects, often designed for use by government agencies, but only limiting that to select civil society organizations. So again, limiting grassroots participation. So what could make this different this time around with Sumbong sa Pangulo, knowing what we do now with these previous platforms that didn't work out?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's very important to have a very concrete institutional approach in solving our corruption problem. Because as you said, this has been done before and nothing really happened. We had a lot of corruption controversies before, and we didn't see any politician punished in relation to these corruption activities. You know, Kathy, there are theories in institutional economics and political economy where the formula for addressing corruption is really one, reducing discretion. Number two, increasing the likelihood of getting caught. And number three, you have to factor in the different policies that you need to put in place to limit this discretion. And that's why, you know, policies like access to information, disclosure, public participation, third-party participation are very important because this is what limits the discretion between government and the private sector. Even if we have very strict laws, a very high penalty, but if no one's getting caught, then, you know, all these initiatives are useless. Kaya it's important to have very concrete approach in solving these problems. The president can push for the freedom of information law. The president can push for disclosure of beneficial ownership. That's very important because we can see, and as he said, some of these construction companies are also politicians. We don't know that because we don't have a database on who the real owners are of these companies. Beneficial ownership disclosure is standard in many European and Western countries already. In the Philippines, we don't even talk about it. So there are a lot of policies that the president can pursue, different institutional approach that are already in place but needs to be operationalized, that he can do to make sure that his action, his commitment will really result in concrete actions.
All right. Well, a lot more to look after what you say is a good start. Thank you so much for your insights, Ashelo Magno of the UP School of Economics and co-chair of the Global Steering Committee of OGP. And And Meralco customers will see higher electricity bills this month as the company implements a rate increase driven by higher generation and transmission charges. The overall rate will go up by over 62 centavos to 13 pesos and 27 centavos per kilowatt hour in August from 12 pesos and 64 centavos in July. The adjustment marks the second month of rate hikes, translating to an increase of around 125 pesos in the bill of households consuming 200 kilowatts per hour. Meralco spokesperson Josal Dariaga attributed the rate hike to higher generation and transmission charges, while Utility Economics head Lawrence Fernandez cited the peso's depreciation against the US dollar as a key factor. Meralco and Signal, the owner of this channel, are both part of the MVP group. And you're watching Money Talks. Coming right up, U.S. inflation remains steady in July with consumer price index standing at 2.7% year-on-year. Jasper Ondap of Regina Capital Development Corporation talks about how this will affect the Fed's policy decisions. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. U.S. inflation remained steady in July, keeping the rate cut in the next Fed's meeting at play. Consumer price index stood at 2.7% year-on-year last month, matching June's rate. Core inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, stood at 3.1%, up. Analysts polled by the Wall Street Journal expected a rate of 2.8%. Figures suggest that businesses are curtailed from passing on tariff costs to consumers, though the new import taxes were only enforced on August 7th. As for the Fed, this likely removes an obstacle to lowering rates in response to growing worries about a slowing labor market. On Truth Social, U.S. President Trump called out Fed Chair Jerome Powell for not easing rates when the economy is performing well. U.S. equities rose yesterday, Tuesday, on the back of a steady inflation report that boosted hopes for a rate cut. Both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq posted fresh records. The Nasdaq rose by nearly 1.4% and the S&P by 1.1%. The Dow, which hasn't made any records since December 4th, also advanced by 1.1%. U.S. 10-year Treasury yields ticked up to 4.294%. And gold prices tumbled for the second straight session, settling at $3,348 per troy ounce. U.S. markets are making marginal changes in after-hours trading. Both the Dow and the S&P are down by less than 0.1%, and the Nasdaq is up by less than 0.1%. Let's take a look at the Asian markets. They're mostly up in the first hours of trading this Wednesday, tracking Wall Street's gains. Japan's Nikkei 225 leading the markets, rising by more than 1%. South Korea's Kospi ticks up by 1/3%, but Australia's ASX 200 is down by 1/3%. Let's take a quick check on our own markets here in the Philippines. PSEI opening this Wednesday higher by about 0.1% at 6,300. The stock market bounced back Tuesday by over 0.5%. Investors hunted for bargains after the local bourse declined for 3 sessions, according to PhilStocks Financial. As for the Philippine peso, it opens stronger today at 56.88 to the dollar. The peso ended yesterday's session a tad weaker at 57.075 against the greenback. The 10-year government bond yields have ticked up to 6.087% from the previous close of 6.077%. Joining us now is Jasper Ondap, equity analyst at Regina Capital Development Corporation. Good to see you, Jasper. Welcome back to the program.
Hello, Cathy. Good morning. Thank you for having me again.
All right, so how are you interpreting the latest rise in U.S. core CPI, picking up in services, though goods services were more subdued? Does it support or weaken a Fed rate cut in the coming month?
Well, I think prices really, or the inflation print really, was literally looking at the CPI, which came in at 2.7%, just 10 points lower than the target or the forecast 2.8. And just looking back at what happened just a few minutes ago, when, as I've stated earlier, President Trump was already attacking Fed Chair Powell that he should already cut rates, etc., etc. But they remain data dependent. And just a few months ago, or just last month, CME Group looked at probability of a rate cut at 50%. But post jobs report of NFP coming at 73,000 really puts the Fed or the Fed rate cut more than 80%. And just a matter of fact, yesterday night when I was watching the news just before the inflation print came out, the probability of the rate cut was at 80%. And after just the release of the the muted inflation coming at 2.7 really pumped up the probability to more than 90%.
Okay, given the higher probability then of 90%, what does that mean for the Bangko Sentral? The governor himself, Eli Remolona, had guided about 24 hours ago a quite likely rate cut on August 28th.
Yeah, so if you just look back, when the US Fed or signals a rate cut, the rest of the global economies really tends to follow this trend. And when we look at our domestic figures, we've seen GDP coming at 5.5, quite moderate. We're seeing the inflation 0.9. We see a bit muted unemployment rate. So all the data aligns, and we even see the foreign exchange coming at 56, 57 levels. All the data aligns for the BSP to actually cut rates coming later this month. And I guess that could be the next catalyst after the rebalancing, and the MSA rebalancing coming the next few months, the next few weeks.
All right, what's a rebalancing about, and how is that affecting trade right now? We're at 6,300 as we speak.
Yeah, so usually when rebalancing happens, the entry of plus and the exit of bloom, there should be a tendency of changes when it comes to inflows and outflows coming from all investors, funds, and other traders tend to rebalance their portfolios. That doesn't usually happens when there's a huge sell-off or buy-offs, especially for the entrants or the ones who exits the index. And similar for those other rebalancing figures, when they tend to rebalance, gaining for the highest probability or highest stock they think that will actually go up in the coming periods.
Okay, so if you were to look at what's going to be rebalanced, what should we look out for? Which ones are going to be in the new mix and which ones are out?
Yeah, so at least for the PSE index, there's tend to be really the liquidity as well as the performance, or really when the move, or let's just say the market cap, basically what rearranges the index, right? So I think the entry of plus, given its volatility in a couple of weeks, really puts out them in the index, and their liquidity having a huge, more than $1 billion a day in volume. And considering the plus performance in the last few figures, if you look at back 2, 3 years ago, plus is now more than 1,000, more than 100, 300%. So the entry of the plus into the index is very much already set in stone. And thus everyone is at least few months back are already looking into it.
And indeed they have been. Well, thank you so much for those insights, Jasper Ondap of Regina Capital Development Corporation. Now, security experts and policymakers have gathered to explore ways of bolstering the Philippines' strategies for stronger maritime defense. Mobile journalist Marimon Reyes filed this report.
A roundtable discussion held yesterday in Makati, spearheaded by the Strat-Based Institute, tackled the developments and pathways towards an enhanced U.S.-Philippines cooperation amidst today's challenging times, especially at sea.
The forum brought together thought leaders,
experts, and stakeholders from the government, military, diplomatic community, and the academe. During this, the Heritage Foundation senior experts shared in the discussion their latest research on strengthening the alliance, showing the Philippines is an ally of the U.S. that holds strategic importance in the Western Pacific, and that its relationship with one another was said to have been reinvigorated due to the increasing threats and harassment posed by China, especially with its disregard for international law. The current steps the Philippines is taking to defend itself from the harassment and aggression of China in the West Philippine Sea was also observed to possibly avoid broad regional action from the aggressor, and that the American forces will continue to work with the country through joint military exercises, investment in military equipment, and building of facilities at military bases for better interoperability.
We think it is a very real possibility that we could be engaged in high-intensity conflict with China within the next 5 years. And we're not sure we can win. We don't think we're going to lose, so we look across the board and say, what can we do in the immediate term, what can we do in the medium term, and what can we do in the long term to work with our key allies and partners within the region.
And we applauded and explained to American audiences, in particular conservatives in Congress, how important the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept is. That this is the Philippines taking very seriously the shift in regional security and looking at external threats for the first time in a long time.
Meanwhile, according to Strat-based President Professor Dindo Manhit, as the bilateral tie of the Philippines with the U.S. grows deeper, both are also laying the foundations for lasting peace. Manhit underscored the importance of fostering the same kind of cooperation with other like-minded states.
Amid these perilous times, such friendships are a gem and a dispensable way to achieve an open, more secure Indo-Pacific region.
Also in line with the recent incident in Bajo de Masinloc last Monday, wherein a China Coast Guard vessel collided with a People's Liberation Army Navy ship while trying to block PCG vessels planning to deliver supplies to fishermen in the area. PCG spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore J. Tariela, assured that despite the continuing harassment, they, alongside the armed forces of the Philippines, will continue to protect the country's waters and the rights of Filipino fishermen.
The guidance of the President yesterday was very clear, no? Hindi ito magiging dahilan ng pag-alis ng ating mga sasakyang pandagat sa Bajo de Masinloc or in any other places sa West Philippine Sea.
Mobile journalist Marymon Reyes, we are One News.
In corporate news, PLDT posted a 6% increase in its second quarter attributable net income to over 9 billion pesos, lifted by higher service revenues, according to its latest financial statement. Total revenues from the April to June period rose by nearly 2% to over 54 billion pesos from 53 billion a year ago. Broken down, service revenues made up most of the top line, while non-service revenues fell by over 33%. In a briefing, PLDT and Smart Communications Chairman and CEO Manuel V. Pangilinan said the second half should be better, while telco core income will likely remain flat for the year. PLDT and Signal, the owner of this channel, are both part of the MVP Group. SM Prime Holdings has allocated 7 billion pesos for the phased redevelopment of SM Mega Mall in Mandaluyong City. SM Prime says the project will be completed in stages between 2027 and 2029. The company also said the redevelopment will feature nature-inspired architecture, improved mobility, energy-efficient systems, and intuitive wayfinding. SM Supermall's president Stephen Tan said Mega Mall leads the company's 88 malls in sales per square meter, followed by SM Mall of Asia. He expects higher foot traffic once the new leasable spaces open. And before we go, Filipino athlete Carlos Bailon Jr. claims bronze in the men's Sanda at the Games in Chengdu, China. Bailon swept Kazakhstan's bet to give Team Philippines its second medal in the competition after Kyla Napoles' silver in Jiu-Jitsu. The bronze adds to Bailon's stellar year, coming just months after his gold at the World Cup in China. More medals could be on the way, with Checa Centeno and the billiard semifinals and Olympic boxer Hergy Bayadan advancing in women's kickboxing. Congratulations, everybody. Good luck, Team Philippines. That is it for Money Talks with Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. We're also streamed live on YouTube and on our Facebook channels. Have a great day ahead.